Welcome to Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. My name is D. Kelly. I'm here with Jim Shaley. Good to see you again, Jim.
It is good to be back with you.
We have taken upon ourselves this second season not only to continue the journey into the inner landscape of personality and styles and how we interact with one another, but also to add that to that dreams and how dreams might affect that journey. And for some people, can be a wonderful doorway or gateway into exploring their own inner self. But this week, what I would like to explore a little bit more, we've touched on it a couple of times, but I'd like to give a whole episode to it, and that's to the process of grief. My guess is that you've worked with numerous clients who have either come because of that, or during your time with them, they've experienced significant grief and are trying to process those things. I don't know that we need to stay with this, but at least in the last 10 years, there has been a lot of emphasis on the 5 stages of grief. And for some people, that's helpful. For others, it may not be a good description of where they find themselves in terms of being stuck in a particular place. But those 5 stages are often referred to as kind of the progression through which people often go with grief. The first stage being denial, then bargaining, then anger, then depression, and then acceptance. Again, I don't know that it's as neat and clean as that model might suppose, but I think it is at least a framework that helps people begin to realize, oh, this isn't a one-stop, I deal with it and it's over, but it takes time to work through it.
It's very true. But a lot of people, they're on the personalities, they would love it if I go through all these 5 stages and I'm good, right? I won't be sad anymore. I won't be having any grief anymore.
Yeah. And can we do that in this 1 hour?
Yeah, it's very true. It's like, so when I leave here, I should not be grieving anymore?
Right. Let's maybe, for those who are listening and maybe aren't in the midst of any kind of grief, just expand the ways by which we might experience grief. We often think of grief.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead.
Yeah. Often think of grief associated with the death of someone we care about, which is certainly an incredibly important one. But there can be grief about your kids leaving home, going off to college in an empty nest. There can be a lot of grief.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even retiring from a job you loved, there's so many forms that we kind of minimize and don't realize it's a grief process that certainly upset us more than we realize.
I think sometimes people who don't have pets minimize the grief that somebody experiences when they lose a pet.
That's so true. I learned that early on in my career, that a loss of a pet sometimes is so devastating. Yeah. And I haven't had pets as an adult, so I couldn't fully appreciate it. But then once I realized how impactful they are, it really helped me face that and say, well, you know what, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Any ideas, and if nothing now, we can come back to it later, but when somebody isn't recognizing that they're going through grief, sometimes they are kind of deaf to their own inner noises.
Well, there's subtlety of grief in a relationship where the other person isn't as available as you'd like them to be, or they're going through something that's just individual. There's a grief process even in that. A marriage that isn't working like you hoped it would. Anything like that has grief associated with it, and we often don't think in those terms.
Yeah, that reminds me. We've talked many times and have a full episode on midlife and individuation issues, but midlife can be that time where dreams you kind of still hoped would come about, a realization that I need to let go maybe of some dreams.
It absolutely ain't going to be. Yeah.
And there can be just that whole series of denial, bargaining, anger that comes through those things. So I guess I'm asking, get us started kind of a question. When I realize, oh, I really am kind of experiencing a real loss here, how do I start to move through the stages instead of just being stuck in one place? Any thoughts on
Well,
that?
yeah, it's like, do you want do you wanna feel your way through it? Do you wanna think your way through it? What do you wanna do? So you you wanna feel it, but at the same time, you don't wanna stay stuck in the feeling, and yet, you wanna give thoughts to it, but you don't wanna think yourself out of it. So it really is, from that perspective, challenging to know how to respond. But I also will say that given the STIR, uh, framework, each personality is going to experience it differently. I mean, I worked with lots of people that maybe are natural initiators who they will just move forward. They will think that "Yeah, I've talked about it, I've done this, and now we don't need to do it anymore," right? And yet that may not be true, but that's the bias of their personality will drive how they're dealing with the grief at times.
I would add that often, certainly not always, depending on how balanced an initiator is, but often an initiator can be a little impatient with somebody who's not moving through it as quickly as he or
Oh,
she
gee,
would think they ought to.
absolutely. And
Which,
the stabilizer oftentimes can get stuck in it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I,
because
I
they're
think
more
I think
static.
research has shown that the loss of a child is a strong predictor of a relationship breaking down,
Oh, yes.
divorce,
Yeah.
and
I just met with a couple this week that lost their child, and we talked about how they had a neighbor across the street who lost a child, and their marriage didn't survive, and they said their marriage survived because they gave each the freedom to grieve the way they needed to grieve. Yeah.
yeah, part of the impasse is that in a relationship, people typically grieve in different ways at a different rate. And so they're not on the same page through much of that grief process because their personality bent is different. And that can create such tension in a relationship.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, Jim. There are two ways that I'd like to look at the STIR model, those personality styles, a bent that we have toward stabilizer, transformer, initiator, responder. That two things: the way in which if I were to lean into one of those, how that might affect my response to grief, where I might get stuck. But then the other piece that I'd like us to maybe move toward is if we have learned this kind of inner skill of accessing all four of those,
Mhm.
what could we bring into our life from the inside that would help us move through grief
Mhm.
at a pace that is healthy and good? So let's move toward that. But let's start with kind of the natural bent if we are a particular style. You've already mentioned that the initiator would just like the checklist of what do I
Mhm.
need to do to grieve this and move forward.
Yeah.
And sometimes just gets impatient with him or herself
Oh,
because it's not
absolutely.
happening fast
Yeah,
enough.
and that's where in my mind, that's the purpose of grief is to slow that person down to realize, "Wait a minute, I've lost something significant." And then that's the unconscious way to try to balance them out to get them to go to a different part of the STIR model.
Yeah. A natural responder. A responder will struggle with giving themselves their own self-care
Absolutely,
attention.
they'll fix food for everybody else.
Yeah. And stay
They'll
busy doing it.
absolutely, they'll stay very busy doing it. They'll get very busy taking care of other people typically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Stabilizer? What's kind of the natural response to grief for a stabilizer?
They'll probably be pretty much internal, and, I can imagine they would organize their house. They would stay very busy bringing order to their lives. They would, just stay really busy, really, really busy. And because
Um,
it's another way, because that's the masculine quadrant, the initiator and the stabilizer. So they both stay busy. but the stabilizer would stay busy, but they would really have a deep sadness within that they could feel, but they would keep staying busy. Whereas initiator might feel it, but would not want to feel it, so they would dismiss it in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I would add to that that a stabilizer, if this is the death of a loved one, they would naturally be the person that would step in to help organize the memorial service.
Yeah.
They would
Right.
put together all of the details. They would give attention to all of the things that they think would honor and memorialize the
Yep.
individual.
They would be like the ideal would be someone if you lost your child to some disease, and they would start a foundation.
Yeah. And would learn everything about that disease
Yeah.
in doing so. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the
Oh,
negative side of that is they would probably stay stuck in it.
mm,
Yeah, that's the other part of it. Yeah, because again, we have a positive and negative aspects to all of these expressions. So,
yep. I would also say, and I think this is probably just because I'm more familiar with that stabilizer energy, is that the organizational side is a socially acceptable way to avoid wrestling with the painful feelings.
yes,
So
absolutely.
it becomes avoidance.
Mhm.
And so eventually that avoidance is going to crumble, and hopefully they have a support network that
That's
helps them
why
step into
again,
that.
that's why I think that the balancing aspect is so important, so that they can be reminded even in the movement that they acknowledge their sadness and the loss.
The one we haven't mentioned is the natural tendency of the transformer in
Eh,
those
yeah,
moments.
yeah. I'm smiling and laughing because they would avoid it and probably have a sense of humor about it.
Mm,
They would have fun,
distract?
yeah, distract, or tell funny stories about the person they lost, or they would, get drunk or get high
Mm.
to cope with it.
So sometimes grief, and again, that can be grief over a lot of things, for the transformer can send them back down the addiction pathway. Is that part of what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And again, that would be the avoidance pattern. And so
So,
how do you get someone who's a transformer, who's spontaneous and energetic? Well, you may want to engage with the lighthearted good side of of the loss of the person. But typically, if it's a devastating loss for a transformer, it'd be hard pressed not to go into some form of avoidance as far as medication or drinking too much or getting high just to avoid the pain of it. Because remember, the challenge of all this is how do we access where we need to be to handle pain? Physical, emotional,
yeah,
it's just the real deeper challenge for all of us.
I think it's interesting is you talked about all four of those approaches. Each one has their own style of avoidance.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it seems to me that grief is one of those things that we have an incredibly difficult time facing. We're experiencing it, but it brings out the avoidance characteristic in every style.
Yeah, how many times in sessions someone has said, "I'm just tired of feeling this. I just don't wanna feel it anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Please take it away. What can I do to get rid of this?" And
And
what does it look like to sit with grief and your pain and your sorrow and sadness and yeah.
yeah, and I think there would be many, particularly those that use the model often of the five stages to say, well, you've got to be patient as you experience the anger, as you experience the bargaining stage or the feelings of depression. And that acceptance doesn't necessarily make all of the pain go away. It
So
it,
true.
it channels it in ways that don't leave you debilitated.
It would be like for me, an unconscious expression of deep grief that accesses the transformer would be someone who goes outside and just screams at the top of their lungs because the
Mm,
sadness is so strong. And
yeah,
that's spontaneous, it's impulsive, it's getting rid of the pain in that sense. That'd be a way of looking at why people become so expressive at times. They don't know what to
Yeah.
do. The pain is so intense.
I will say I'm a believer in grief counselors, people who have specialized in this area that offer some wonderful, certainly offer a listening ear, a sympathetic ear, but also offer some techniques and models for moving through grief. I know some who have specialized in this and do some incredibly good work. You, though, just gave a perfect bridge for us of what would it mean for even if a person knows that their bent is to one style of responding to grief, what would
Mm.
it be like if they could know themselves well enough that they need to tap into other parts of themselves to move through grief in a healthy way and come out the other side of the journey with an acceptance that has with it this hope for moving forward. So, just take any one of the
Mm.
four and work through all four of them, Jim. Of if I'm trying to tap into that myself, we often say, "What are we going to use the initiator to do to take action?" That kind of thing. So, but let's make it. Let's just say empty nest. Your kids have left, and you're feeling an incredible sense of loss that the home feels far too silent. It feels incredibly empty. Not having that task in your life of caring for and looking over all
Yeah.
of that. So let's use that as a sense of loss. And how am I going to tap into all four of the parts to help movement
So,
in my life?
so can I make it personal?
Oh, please do.
So how'd you do it?
Yo, that personal. Okay, back to making this my personal therapy session. Great.
uh,
Mm,
since I didn't have the privilege of doing that myself, it is interesting because you're right. It's like acknowledging why do you miss it so much? Did you put too much energy into it? Asking some of those preliminary questions are always interesting from that
yeah.
perspective.
I think the wonderful thing that you bring is you bring a somewhat objective voice that asks those questions without having a strong
So
agenda
that's
of where you've been for yourself. But I'm happy to answer that. So I think that when both my girls were gone, because I tend to lean toward the stabilizer side, I found myself distracting myself by trying to reorganize what life looked like.
Mm.
So, what are the new priorities? What are the new goals? How do we reorganize the house and the week? And what do weekends look like? And I think that that was probably my method of avoiding the grief that I felt.
Okay.
So that was like the
Mhm.
the avoidance piece. The next is how I think for me, I typically take the next step of what does the initiator need to do side of me to take action of some sort that will address the grief that I'm feeling, the emptiness that I'm feeling. So that would be step one.
Okay.
I can edit out a long silence here. Wow.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was just thinking in the sense that you can't underestimate some people that are relieved that their
True.
kids are gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there isn't that. So we're dealing more with the aspect of the house having different energy, basically. Is that
Yeah.
or
Oh, I would also say that in a marriage family that has two adults that are both experiencing this, they can experience it very differently. I mean, one can think we've been waiting for this for 15 years, and
absolutely true. Yeah.
the other one can kind of have the approach of, oh crap, I don't know what to do now
Mhm.
um, without them.
Mhm. I mean, again, it organizes your world. Now, some people will just shift into if their children are having kids, they'll shift into the grandparent mode and continue to care that way. Again, the little outlier here is challenging people to be more conscious and more aware of their journey. when I think the bias for most of us is just to try to get through life and not to overthink stuff. So the first challenge is to realize, okay, all these stages of life are significant and they create differences inside of us. And some people want to deal with that, some people don't. Some people want to just kind of like just get to the end of the road here, and other people are more thoughtful about it. So I think that's a big part of processing it is like, okay, we're going to be empty nesters. Some people are proactive and make a plan for it. They start traveling, they do that. Other people are relieved. Other people just kind of, oh yeah, it's different, but we're okay. I'm still working. It's how thoughtful do you want to be about it? But you're right. There is definitely a bias as to how each of one of the of your bias of your bent to handle it is driven by your personality. A transformer would definitely probably, if the kids go off to college, transformer probably would want to go visit them at college. Go hang out with them a little bit. Kids may not want that, but that's one way of dealing with it.
So that's interesting. So if I'm not naturally a transformer, I might ask myself, are there things of spontaneity that might help me
Yes,
move
because
through
kids
this time?
because kids represent that.
Yeah,
You have to
right.
react to their energy. So, yeah, you have to that's a great point.
I also would think that if I'm not naturally a responder, then I probably ought to pay attention to self-care issues. Like, do I need to do something for myself that gives me space to think about my future, take a walk that gives me a chance to see a bigger storyline than the one that I've been involved in all along?
Absolutely process, what this is really hard for a responder, but to process what I gave up in raising my kids.
Oh,
Where did
oh,
I
yeah.
where did I disconnect from myself because I knew I had to take care of the kids, and I wanted to, but challenging them to have those questions, that's pretty tough. Some people will like stabilizers will go in immediately unconsciously and redo their kids' rooms. And the kids will come home from college and go, "What the why'd you redo my room?" "Well, because you 'cause you're gone, and so I wanted to turn it into an exercise room." And the kids are like, "What? I'm coming home occasionally." Anyway, so
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. They just need to say, this is my way of responding to grief. Deal with it.
Absolutely true. "I'm grieving you, can't you tell? You no longer exist."
It's my new it's my new trophy room.
That's right, trophies for me. Yeah. Those are great points. Stabilizers consciously, a stabilizer was more likely to, if they stop and think about it, really process how much structure and purpose that raising a family brought to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think it's moments like this, since grief is such a really a powerful emotion, and it is often tied specifically to something,
Mhm.
it provides an opportunity for any person to ask the question, what am I least likely to pay attention to inwardly because of my natural bent? And
Yeah,
how can I pay
that's a great
attention to
that's a great
that?
that's a great point. Mhm.
So, yeah, if I'm least likely to pay attention to the spontaneity side of myself, what could I do to pay attention to that? If I am least likely to do self-care, how could I pay attention to that in this moment? And just stepping out of a like a long-standing pattern can just raise the awareness of, okay, this is what grief does. This is how I try to process through grief.
Again, the very basic point is to acknowledge that I'm grieving.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Because some people will dismiss it and say, "Well, it's just life." Kids, we raise them, they leave home. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. But to acknowledge and say, "No," that's why I will tell clients often that there's a lot of grief associated with life that we just don't realize is affecting us. Mm.
I will add one more thing that seems important to me, and that is that I feel like when grief affects a family, let me rephrase that. When loss affects a family system can have developed in such a way that one person carries a disproportionate weight of that grief.
That's very true. Mhm.
And I think that's incredibly unfair. When we allow one person in the family to carry the weight of grief, we've done a disservice to everyone in the family. The
Oh, yeah,
person
because
who's
you'll be saying things like, "Get over it. What are you doing? You
right.
still sad about this?" Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So one of the things you can do is to think, how could I carry some of the weight of that grief? Kind of a fair share. I mean, it's never a fair thing, but I always think about that when I'm working with couples, and one is the one who always is one thing. And if I can carry a little bit of that emotional baggage, that emotional heaviness, that emotional weight, all of us can carry a few pounds of grief a lot easier than one person can carry 100 pounds of grief.
Mhm.
So,
It's kinda like, let's say there's a family member that I'm closer to than you are, and I'm devastated. Is there a way that you can help carry some of that? And I think that's where tending to that person and knowing their heart, you can actually model for them some
mm,
relief or some way to handle it by walking alongside of them.
yeah. And that's very different than saying, get over it.
Little little bit. I mean,
That's,
you're walking alongside 'em, you could whisper, but yeah, no, it's yeah, because that's how we get over it, is for people to walk alongside us.
yeah,
I'm sorry, we don't get over it, we figure out a way to live with it.
great point. And to know that someone you're close to has enough empathy to hold some of that grief with you
Well, that's so true.
makes it a little bit easier to face one more day.
It's like, it's been 15 years since my child died, but occasionally, still a few people will remember his birthday.
Mm,
That I hear that often from people that have lost kids or
yeah,
spouses, that people remembering certain moments with that person helps carry the grief.
yeah. I would just a suggestion, those who are in a long-term relationship, when you become familiar with triggers of your partner, I think one of the most empathetic things is to recognize a trigger before your partner has to tell you that there's been a trigger.
That's so true. That's yeah, you try to teach that forever. But yeah.
Yeah,
It's like the extreme example that we probably talked about before, the not intuitive sense, but if I've caused great pain by, say, having an affair, and I know my spouse is in pain, but I want to avoid it, for me to on purpose go and say, "I'm so sorry I hurt you," without them having to tell you to do that. It's like that's the epitome of validation and understanding that they're still hurt. Even if I don't wanna feel it
yeah,
ever again, I will rise above it and acknowledge that. In my mind, that's the true empathy that we so struggle with because it's making it about them and their journey and not about me.
yeah. And I think one of the most difficult aspects of grief is the feeling of loneliness that you're in it alone and nobody else is sensing it. That just compounds it or magnifies it. And for somebody to come alongside and simply be a presence, it kind of takes away that loneliness and allows you to look at the grief as as it stands alone, apart from feeling alone in the midst of it. A tough discussion, but boy, this is something we all face at some point in our
It
journey.
is. Hopefully, it made enough sense, but you're right. It's a broad subject.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks everybody for listening in. If you have any questions or thoughts, we sure hope you would leave some comments and we
That
will
would be great. Mhm.
hopefully respond to those things. Good to be with you, Jim. We'll come back in another week.
Always good to be with you, D.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good stuff.